Hey, welcome back. This is part 2 of our conversation about building MVPs. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, we got into what an MVP really is, how to stay focused, and how to avoid building way too many features at once. Now we're picking up where we left off and talking through the money side of things, more on how to budget for your MVP, manage technical debt, and make the right build decisions early on. Let's crack on.
Andy, just switching it up slightly, because you've both got experience of working with big organizations and startups. I know you have as well, Aleksa, but I think Andy does it more on a day-to-day basis now. So you talked through your process there, Andy. Do you think it's any different when you're building out a product for a multinational customer of yours versus somebody who's come to you with an idea and wants you to help get them off the ground?
I guess the bigger guys have probably got internal dev teams. We often deal with CTOs rather than CMOs, so they know how hard product can be. They know how hard engineering can be. They know how hard good engineers can be to find. They know how expensive they are. So I guess we would find them more realistic in that they know what they're getting into. Whereas I think startups maybe drink the startup Kool-Aid of, just find a friendly founder to join the team, who's a fresh graduate, who's keen to work for, not very much money. And I think there can be a naivety with startups, I think, that benefit from having their hand holding or some demonstrations or some talking through some other products and projects and comparing what good looks like against what corner cutting looks like. But the big guys tend to be more, I guess, cautious. They want everything documented. They want sign off at every stage. Whereas the startup guys are a little bit more agile, a bit more ninja, which is iterative, which is the whole point of being a startup and building an MVP anyway. But you can end up redoing stuff. Like the lack of discipline in the startup world means you end up doing things and thinking it's okay to fail and learn, when really you could have avoided the failing and learning by thinking about it a bit longer, or asking someone to get a professional in or something else. So I think there is like I say, there's loads of similarities in terms of how we would approach it. Technical proof of concept, prototype, etc., etc. But the attitude, the personalities are different in both camps.
Yeah, I think that leads on to the next question, which relates to the budget for an MVP. And I imagine, as you say, if you're building out a product for an existing customer who understands the price of tech, the price of developers, the price of the time it takes, it's probably a slightly easier conversation than an entrepreneur who's come to you with an idea and thinks that you can knock it out for 10 grand, something like that. So how should founders think about that, the sort of budgeting for an MVP? I know it's a difficult question, but it'd be good to get both your thoughts on that.
Go for it, Aleksa.
I think it's a definitely different world depending on where you're coming from. I think the process to what Andy was saying before is product development is kind of the same, whether you're coming from a kind of solo founder or in a big company that launches another product. But the difference is in the approach, in the whole management, support, compliance, all the rest that come with a product, which I think established businesses have to think about more. Hence, they have a bigger cost to think about, and the bigger budgets they need to be accounted for when you're building a startup, when you're building a product. When you think about the founders building the first product, I think just adding to what we discussed in the question before around knowing what's important to build and scoping your MVP so it's really minimal but still viable is the key aspect, because technology is expensive. I mean, that is something that everybody will agree. It's hard to get by talent. You have big businesses in tech who are able to hoover over quite a lot of the brightest young graduates, and being a startup, you need to be more focused on the culture to build that sort of product. It's about getting a group of people in the room and hashing something together really quickly and launching it out there. That sort of engagement and culture, it's really hard to get in a kind of larger company, which has to be, for the right reasons, a bit more structure. If you think about more corporate structure and the management layers and everything else, really. So the difference in budgets will be different. But the cost of technology, if you think your pure cost of your development days or similar, are probably going to be the same. So it's not going to be extremely cheap to do. You can't do, unfortunately, an MVP for, let's say, 5K today, because it will give you maybe a week's worth of someone to do some work. What you should be looking for as a founder is a minimal scope, and then get there at the minimal number of iteration you can get. It can mean 10, 20, 30, 50,000 pounds maybe, but still kind of, can be built in a kind of well-defined budget. If you're looking at the bigger businesses and products, I mean, I have been out of that world for a while, so maybe Andy can give us some insight. What sort of budgets are there? But they will be slightly higher than that, I suspect.
You reminded me of a big bank who set up a little startup, which ended up employing, I think it was 300 people. And by the time we spoke to them, they'd spent 50 million quid building an app that lets people upload receipts for expenses. And we met them 2 years into this project, 50 million quid spent. And you could upload an image which got stored in a folder with no OCR, no data interpretation. Like literally they had a file upload. They built a team of 200 people, spent a lot of time on recruitment and built nothing. So yeah,
how not to do it. That's how not to do it.
Right. And then it got binned, needless to say. But I think it depends on the business. I mean, I've seen signs around here. I live in South Manchester, and there's booze delivery 24/7 posters on lampposts and stuff. But in theory, that's an MVP, because if people are phoning that number, you might go, great, we'll build a website for this, because we're going to be the Uber Eats of booze delivery for people who are still up at 3 a.m. or whatever. In which case, yeah, under 30K is fine, But once you start building tech, and it is doing stuff, it's pricey. And then you've still got, I mean, again, people, like Aleksa says, again, the compliance around the big guys, they're not going to go live without a cookie control feature that lets you accept or reject cookies, terms and conditions that have gone through rounds of lawyers. Whereas, a startup, although these things are legal requirements, may choose to ignore those for a few weeks while they test their product. Not in any way advocating that they do that on this podcast. I wouldn't drag AHE into this in a repute. But those are the kind of things, like what do you absolutely need to test your product and go from there. But I think, by the time you have spent some money on some tech and then spent some money on marketing, which is going to be probably even more than your tech bill, you go to market, and then you've got phase 2, 3, and 4 with all the stuff that you put back in the tin during the convergent thinking phase. A startup isn't a cheap enterprise. Getting started might be cheap, but running a business isn't.
Good. No, cool. Thanks very much. And then I guess finish on that one for you, Aleksa. I don't know if you'd agree with this statement, but I'm going to make it. Technical debt is always a factor in early builds. Is it? And if it is, how much is acceptable in an MVP, and when and how does it become a problem?
Well, yeah, I would probably make it even broader. Technical debt is always a challenge, always. Whatever you do and build, it doesn't have to be an MVP or not. Technology and software development is all about trade-offs. Trade-offs in the tech stack you do, and the experience of the team you can afford, and the time you have to work against as a kind of deadline ahead. So all of these will contribute to some form of tech debt. and that is just inevitable, really. Technology moves so quickly that even if you do the best thing possible, in a few months' time, maybe you will realize that you should be doing something slightly differently because the best practices have moved on. So I think it's unrealistic to think, oh, there is no tech debt. There is always will be. And probably in building an MVP more than usual, because your focus is on getting a minimal product that you can sell to your customers, which means that if you have to speed up some bits, I think that's perfectly understandable and acceptable. The one thing I will caveat this for is the core bit that is really your secret sauce that is selling your product should be the best possible product you can build. So if there is some way you can think about, getting around best practices, or maybe doing things a bit quicker so you can hack it up, maybe just on the edges of the platform. But that said, in the modern software world and development, there's a lot of tools, practices that allow you to, at least for an important bit, always follow what is currently the best practice. I mean, one of the examples is that, everybody runs on a cloud. You will be using cloud to run your software, run it in containers, which brings along a lot of best practices around security, encryption, out of the box. So something that might have been a few years back a tech debt because you could be bothered to think about how you encrypt your data and your traffic, now is really a default option. There's no other option. So the tech debt becomes less of a problem on things like that.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to move on a little bit actually, because we're getting tight for time. So I think this is a true statement. Founders struggle to know when to go live. So how do you advise them on when an MVP is ready enough to launch? Aleksa, I'm going to come to you first for that one.
I mean, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the founders who have this vision of the product of their baby that's doing all these great things and kind of conquers the world in the sector that they're operating with. And you will find more often than not that a lot of them are perfectionists, and that is a good trait to have, because you want to focus on the best possible option. However, it does bring back that, and that's probably one of the most common conversations and challenges where we launch product is, when do you pull the trigger? Because for a lot of founders, product is never good enough. But everybody should realize that products are typically never good enough. Never. We are going to continue developing them as we go along. And it is important to get them out there, because having something out there in the market is infinite time more than having nothing in the market, even though we are waiting for the best possible thing. So our advice is always release as soon as possible, and as often as possible as well. I mean, I will accept that in some cases you have to be careful that you might not have many chances for success. So if you launch something, it's not really good, then you kind of blew up your chances. It might happen in some markets, but there's not a lot of markets like that. And remember, when you launch a product, you're launching it to a very limited number of customers to begin with, because you're probably not going to employ the full marketing machine like you would, Simon, to get billions of people in it. You're starting with 1, 2, 5, 10 maybe customers that you can engage with and get through the journey. So I would still say, by default, release as soon as possible, as often as possible, and move on by testing and getting some feedback and results that can help you drive how to improve the product forward.
Before I move on to Andy, do people listen to you when you tell them that, on the whole? Or have they in the past? Have they in the past listened to you?
Well, yes. I think people do come to realization that things need to be released, and I think, but it is sometimes just a process and a journey and a learning exercise, really. So it's not about me telling someone, "Oh, you need to release it now." If the founders don't realize that themselves, that's going to be a hard sell if you don't go kind of all in with it. But I think especially if you are a part of the startup community, and you work with other founders and see how people succeed and fail and learn on that process. I think it becomes more of a standard, and I think it is now a pretty established thing that everybody knows that you should release as often as possible, as quickly as you can. However, when it comes to individual products, I mean, and I have come to learn that a lot from working with founders, that perfectionism is actually not a bad thing. It is a good thing, but it's something you just have to be aware of, and kind of understand that even though the product isn't 100% perfect, 80%, 80-20 rule, if it has 80% of the features that can be helpful, let's get it out there.
Andy?
Yeah, I think if it looks credible and adds value, you got to get it out. I think if you go straight to code without doing the kind of design UX proof of concept phase, code is infinite. Like, you can always add another feature, do another thing. I think if you do the proof of concept, at least you go, right, here's the 10 screens. This is the core user journey we want people to take. That's what we're going live with. And it helps if there's any problems with that and you've bounced it off other people, they've gone, what about this? Like, that's the time to think about it. That's the architect's plans. But pretty much you should be able to get to the end of that, execute it, go live, without eternally going, oh, but what about, like, you've got a plan. When you get to the end of that plan, you launch. And I agree, the 80-20 rule, the 80% is fine. The next 20% probably takes more than 80% of the time. Like, the last bit is the hard bit. And you always go, well, one more week and we'll have this nailed. And you'll still be working on it for 6 months. So once you're 80% of the way there, just get it up there and start getting some feedback.
Good consistency, I like it. So just to sort of finish off, you both work with a huge wide range of founders to build their MVPs. So you could go back and give advice to a first-time founder that you've worked with, or just first-time founders in general, obviously without naming any names. What advice would you give them with regard to their first MVP?
I'd say it's bigger than you think. I still see things floating around going, I need someone to build me the next Facebook, and I've got $2,000 saved up or something. And yeah, it's big. It's big.
Yeah, just don't pass them our way. Don't pass them our way.
So I always think that. I think don't underestimate UX. I think it is important. It's not about the features or this cool idea. It's about getting people to engage in it and all that kind of stuff. And there is a lot of talk that's come from conferences and the startup culture about fail fast and iterate and all this stuff, which means people cut corners. But there's so much learning. Apple and Google and Facebook and Uber and all these other guys they've nailed UX and they understand how user journeys should work. So you don't need to go and reinvent the wheel and go live with something that you've made up and then A/B test your rubbish go-kart into a Ford Fiesta into an Audi. The Audis already exist. So you can skip those stages by taking some good advice on stuff.
Yep, brilliant. Aleksa?
Good advice, Andy. I think I would probably mention two things. One is rethink the size of the problem you're trying to solve. Just the problem, not the solution. I think a lot of time founders do focus quite a lot on the solution when the problem is actually the only thing that matters. And the other one is from my own learning as well, is to reiterate that importance of focusing just on the important and core journeys, not on the supporting journeys. Because I have done it myself in the past, where we focused a big part of the MVP on something that is essentially a supporting journey. For whatever reason, maybe we don't understand it well enough. Maybe we just went along with founder's vision without kind of discussing it enough. But then realizing that that's basically eaten half of our budget. And in a lot of cases, wasn't used at all, because by the time the supporting journeys are used, you have to go past the supporting journey, the core journey, which is the most important bit. Well, a typical example is the payment process. If you want to charge your customers, yes, you'll need to build an integration and automation and all the rig around it. But for the first customers, you can probably invoice them, especially in your B2B business. You can probably just invoice them. And that is kind of now our mantra, really. But I think that's something we haven't, always got right.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, pair of you. That was really, really interesting. Minimum viable product, the MVP. How to build it the right way, and some of the pitfalls to avoid. This is for Andy, actually. So before we wrap up, do you want to give out some of your details in case anybody wants to connect with you to build them a £2,000 Facebook website?
Be a pleasure, Simon. Find me on LinkedIn, Andy Nicol, Nicol. Sputnik.digital is the website. We've built a couple of MVPs. I hope they qualify as MVPs. Feedback welcome. One is Holler, HOLLR.io, and the other is inventory with no vowels.co. So if you want to check those out, feedback, they might be good examples of MVP. And if people disagree that they're not an MVP, then let me know. I'll let you know.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Aleksa, obviously we all know where you are, but do you want to give out any details? You are available for guest speaking on MVPs, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. Or any topics related to startup and startup tech. We are based in Manchester. I have a big office here in the Manchester Technology Centre, right next to the Circle Square. Any founders or investors are welcome to come along for a coffee and pick up brains for anything they're interested in.
Brilliant. Thank you both very much. It was a really, really good session. And for everyone listening, if you found this episode valuable, make sure to subscribe, follow, and share Fast Growth, the Venture Studio way. We're bringing you more insights from founders, investors, and industry experts on how to build and scale startups the smart way. And if you're an early stage founder looking for support, whether that's investment, tech, expertise, MVP build, strategic guidance, check out the EHE Venture Studio. We'd love to hear from you. That's it for today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of Fast Growth, the Venture Studio way. If you found this valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your network. It helps us reach more investors and founders who are serious about building high-growth tech ventures. You can find Fast Growth, the Venture Studio way on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Want to learn more about EHE Venture Studio and about how we provide tech, funding, and advisory to ambitious startups? Visit www.ehe.ai. Thank you once again, and we'll see you next time on Fast Growth, the Venture Studio way.